Hey, good afternoon, everyone. I hope my voice is audible. You are able to see me, you are able to see my screen. Just use your chat or to let me know whether everything is okay. My voice is audible. That is first thing you need to confirm me. Is it fine? Good afternoon, everyone. I hope my voice. All right, so looks like my voice is audible. Sunny, is my voice audible? Okay, so everything looks good. So good afternoon, everyone. Once again, thank you so much for joining NG India webinar. And I know that this time we are bit, there's a gap between when we did last time and now we are doing. But it's okay. Very first to start with, I would like to ask that how all of you are doing. Everything is okay at home. The way these situations are around us is very sad and demotivating. And I would like and I would request each one of you to start our today webinar with with a giving a thought and a silent time for 10 seconds. We lost some of our community member, Geek 97 community member as well. Pankaj, he was very vibrant member of our community. We lost him due to COVID. So I request each one of you to do a prayer for him for next 10 seconds before we go and start our webinar. So let's start. Okay. All right. So today we are going to talk about change detection in Angular. Now, when you start learning Angular, the first thing what you learn is data binding. You go and start putting those interpolation, you start using those properties binding, event binding, and two-way data binding with that ng model and all that. That is the first thing anyone who starts learning Angular, they start learning from there. And we feel very empowered by framework when we use those binding that we do some changes in component class and template is getting reflected by that. We do some changes at the template by clicking on a button or something like that. And we are able to set property in a component class and those kind of things. As a newer Angular developer, we use them and we try to solve our business problem. But do we really understand that who is the person who is taking care of that responsibility of uh, of uh, making sure that your template and your component class is in sync with each other? So that part of Angular, which makes sure that whatever you have in your component class and on the template, they are always in sync with each other. It's called change detector. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to stop my camera such that we can save some bandwidth and then focus on change detection. Change detection is very important. You really need to understand it if you want to be a good Angular developer. Step one. And step two, that now Angular is old. If you are going for Angular interview, you are appearing in Angular interview, I'm sure that if you know change detection, you have an edge. This is one of the most important interview question as well. So today, next 60 to 70 to 75 minutes, we would cover change detection in a very step-by-step manner. And my responsibility for next 1 hour and little bit more than that is to make sure that this 1 hour is getting utilized. And when you go back from today, after this webinar, you feel that you have learned something. So let's start. And first, let me just close my video. All right. So I hope you are able to see my screen where it says change detection in India webinar May 2021. Now, next what I'm going to do uh, is here what I have done. I have created a simple Angular application. As you see here, this Angular application is created in Angular version 11. I have not upgraded it to 12, which was launched yesterday. So this is a simple Angular application, and right now it has nothing in here. Just a scaffolded component and the template and CSS. And when I'm running that application right now, you see that this pretty beautiful output I'm getting, change detector NG India webinar May 2021. So we are going to use this project, this scaffolded Angular CLI application, and learn change detection. All right. So here to start what I'm going to do, let's first go step by step and see that where actually it helps us, right? What is the main purpose of change detection? So here in the component, let's say that what I'm going to do, I'm going to put a variable count that is number and that has an initial value of 10. Then here in app component, I'm saying that, hey, implements on init. So another important interview question, they ask you that whether constructor gets called first or on init gets called first. I'm sure you know that constructor gets first called. Everyone able to answer that, but when there's a question that whether ng on changes gets called first or ng on init gets first called in component lifecycle, I see that developers get confused. And today we'll try to learn that also. So that one popular question also should get answered. So here I have count number 10. And then what I'm going to do, I'm going to put ng on init, lifecycle hook. And here I would use asynchronous JavaScript function, set in treble. And inside that, so what you see in line number 14, I'm using JavaScript arrow function. So set in treble is JavaScript asynchronous function, which expects a callback function. You can create a function a statement, or you can create a function expression and pass it here. What I'm doing here, I'm just creating an arrow function. Now, what is arrow function? How it is different than other types of function? For that, please come to another JavaScript specific webinar. All right. So here, what I'm going to do here, I'm saying that, hey, this dot count is equal to this dot count plus 1. And I apologize to you for my mechanical keyboard sound. It is a little bit noisy, but the feel of writing code on a mechanical keyboard is really amazing. All right, so here I'm saying that I'm incrementing that value by 1. And then I'm saying that, hey, increment that value each 100 millisecond. Pretty simple code. Now on the HTML here, what I'm saying that, hey, here I'm saying that h2, and then just using interpolation to display that count. So here I'm saying interpolation, using interpolation, displaying that count, and it is here. Let's see that how it runs. So here our application is running successfully, which is here. And in the browser, if I go, you see that here you are getting that 50, 60, 70, like each 100 millisecond, that value is getting incremented. Now understand that value is getting changed. The value is getting changed in the component class, right? That is a pure TS class. That is a pure JavaScript class, JavaScript code, where you are incrementing property of a JavaScript object at the end of the day. Your browser does not understand what is TypeScript. That's the reason I'm using here JavaScript. Your TypeScript has to be transpiled to JavaScript, right? So here you are changing, you are doing something right here in TypeScript each 100 millisecond, and And then you have your template here. And this guy is getting updated, right? You have not written any code for that. We have not written any code for that. We just written the code which was required by our business to increment value of count each 100 millisecond. And we were incrementing that here, and it was getting, it was getting refreshed. Now, who is doing that task of making sure that your data, and when I say data means not data of database or API. I'm talking about, when I say data here, I mean those properties of the component class. So who is taking care of and making sure that the data of your component class, the value in the properties of component class, and how they are, their and on the template, always they are in sync with each other, where you are displaying them. So the part of component, the part of Angular who does this task for you is called change detector. He is the person, change detector, CD. Change detector is the person whose job is to make sure that always your property and template are in sync with each other. Now, if you do not trust me, you think, hey, okay, you are saying that, that's cool, but can you prove it, right? How it is making sure. And for that, what I'm going to do here, I'm going to create one more component for you. So what is the command to create a component? Can someone tell me that? NGGC, something like that, right? NGGC count. This is the command which would create a component for me. So what I'm doing, I'm creating a component called count here. All right. So here I am creating a component count in the application. And here, this count been added. It has added here in the declaration. Everything looks good. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to move this code, what I have written here. I'm going to move this in the count component. All right. So I'm taking this state interval from here and saying Control X and putting it into the count component right here. And then the count component should have one property called count number 10, which I'm passing it here. So everything looks good here. Count plus one. And what I need to do, I need to use this app count right here in the app component HTML. So I'll say that, okay, use the app count, and I'm calling it as h2 count component. And please focus here. This is something which you need to understand. And if you understand it, you'll never forget change detection. Other thing, what I'm going to do, instead of hard coding this value here, I'm saying that, okay, I have a title property. So there is a title property. In that title, I'll say that CD demo. I'm just using the interpolation. I'm binding that there. All right. So we should get almost exactly the same output. So run this. And once again, what I have done here, I just created one component and then using that component as a child component in the app component HTML here. And see that, and I'm taking you to a place where you would really understand what is change detection. Okay, so here it is running. And in meantime, what I'm going to do, I'm going to put one more here. Let's say that title equal to count component. And then I'm taking this title and printing it here. And also I need to print that count. So I'll say that h3 and pretty simple code. And let's see that how we are getting the output here. So it's compiled successfully. We are here, and change detector NG India webinar. It should refresh. So when we are refreshing it, you see that in the count component, you are getting here count component, the title, and then the value is getting incremented 100 each 100 millisecond, and that is perfectly fine. So far, so good. Nothing fancy. We understand that. Only thing what I'm telling you that this value is getting updated. Uh, you are updating that in the component class, but it is getting reflected, and the template and component class are in sync with each other due to a person called change detector. That's what I'm telling you. Now I'm going to prove you that how it is. All right. So here, let me increase the size of. Is it better now? Size? All right. So here, what I'm going to do, and now please everyone focus on the code what I'm writing. All right. In front of you, there should be count component TS file. And in this count component, what I'm doing, I'm going to the constructor here. You know that how to inject a service. You inject a service in a component in the constructor by following a certain syntax. So here I'm saying private CD, all right, and then I'm saying change detector ref. So there is a service called change detector ref, and I injected that in this count component. All right, nothing fancy so far, and I'm telling you that hey, this is the service which makes sure, I mean, this change detector ref represent that change detector, which makes sure that your component class and template are in sync with each other. Now what I'm going to do here, I'm going to be a little bit brave here. And in line number 13, I injected a service in line number 12. And in line number 13, what I'm saying, hey, this dot cd dot detach. Detachment is a very big thing. Last 2 days back, I even tweeted about that we should be detached from the things. Never mind. So here you see that what I have done, I injected that change detector ref, and then I called a function called detach on the instance of change detector ref. Let's see what happens. All right. So let us go save it and see the output. Now I'm here, and there's something happened. If you look at the output, here, my app component CD demo binding is working perfectly as expected. That interpolation here in CD demo is working as it was expected. This count component is again displayed because we are displaying that in, I guess, app component itself, right, in the H2. However, any binding of count component, for example, this title and the value of count, nothing is displayed, nothing is there, nothing. Angular doesn't know how to perform the binding on count component. You know why Angular does not know how to perform the counting on the count component? Because manually we became braver, and manually here we are saying to Angular that, hey, in line number 13, we are instructing Angular that, hey, Angular, I do not want change detector for this component. And we have detached that change detector of this particular component. Now, what is happening, since there is no change detector, Angular is not able to perform binding and other stuff for you. So here in one way, you would now agree with me that this is the guy change detector who is taking care of all the data binding and making sure that your component and the template are in sync with each other. I'll go and comment this, and then again I commented that, and then if I run it again, everything is back. So here you see that that if a component does not have change detector, if a component has detached change detector, even data binding does not work. So change detector is that powerful. So everyone, now when you go in an interview or when you think about change detector while writing your project or talking to your customer or client, just one line and see that image on your screen. Everyone, the change detector is is the part of Angular which makes sure that your component class, properties of component class, and the data of component class are in sync with template. And in a layman term, you can visualize it and you can remember it like the data binding actually gets performed by change detector. And you just saw that when I removed change detector from count component, Angular was not performing data binding for count component. However, it was performing data binding for app component because we did not remove change detector of app component. Now here you have another message. So now you know the definition of change detector. Now what I just said, let me say that again, and then I'll give you 10 seconds to think about it. I just said that Angular was performing, everyone, please, let's come back here and see that if you look at the output here, so Angular is performing this data binding, which is CD demo. In the app component, Angular is performing data binding. However, Angular is not performing data binding for the count component. Agree, everyone? Angular is not performing data binding only for count component. However, it is performing the task of data binding for app component. What does it say? We have only detached or removed change detector of count component, not of app component. It says that in Angular, every component has its own change detector. Very important. Please make a note of that. In Angular, every component has its own change detector. In Angular JS, in good old days when I used to be young like you, there was a generic function, and it was the job of that generic function in AngularJS to make sure that your data and your view are in sync with each other. That is not the case with Angular. In Angular, every component has its own change detector, and they have the responsibility to make sure that only for that particular component, the data, the properties, data value from component and the template are in sync with each other or not. So far you understand the definition of component. So far you know that Angular components are, every component has its own change detector. So far so good, everyone? And now you know, I hope, purpose of change detector and how change detector is powerful. So far so good, everyone? All right. So let's start. So today we are learning change detection in Angular. And my name is Dhananjay Kumar. On Twitter, you can find me with the handle debug_mode. So I'm founder of Geek 97, and at Geek 97 we do training and consulting on Angular and Azure and all that. At Geek 97 we organize one of the world's largest Angular conference, NG India. I'm sure some of you might have been to that conference, and what you see on your screen is a book I have written on Angular. If you need, I can give you ebook. Just contact me for that. For anything, you can write me email on debugmode@outlook.com. Enough of self-promotion. Let's come back to change detector definition. So, what is change detector? Please read that, what is on your screen. And now I hope you would able to understand, because now we have already seen change detector in action. So whatever is on your screen, you should able to understand that. Please read that. Please, everyone, all you 125 people, please read that. Yes, Rajat, I would come to that. We have just started it. All right, everyone now able to understand this definition. The change detector detects the component for the data change and re-render the view to project the updated data. All of you agree with this definition? Yes? The change detector detects the component for the data changes and re-render the view to project the updated data. All right, so if you agree with that, let's move ahead. Every component has its own change detector, which we just saw that. Every component has its own change detector. You saw that. So component and change detector are in one-to-one relationship with each other. They are in one-to-one relationship with each other. Every component has its own change detector. So when you understand that, let's move to the next slide. Now, this is very important. This slide, we are going to spend like 5 minutes on this slide. Okay, everyone? Take a step back and understand this. This is very important. The slide which is in front of you is very important. Let's discuss it. All right. So what I'm going to say, please listen that very carefully, okay? When Angular runs change detector, no one knows. I repeat, when Angular runs change detector, no one knows. We do not know when change detector runs. We do not know when change detector runs. I repeat, we do not know when change detector runs. But if any of these things happen, which is on your screen, if any of these three things happen, then Angular will definitely run the change detector. I repeat, we do not know when Angular change detector runs, but if one of these happens, then definitely at that point of time, change detector runs. And they are an event such as click submit gets fired. So like whenever you perform event binding, so before I explain this slide, there is a very interesting question by Gautam. Can we switch off change detection for whole app? Can you? Yes, you can. Should you? No, never. Okay, Gautam? Then you have to manually manage change detector everywhere, Gautam. So, condition number one, an event such as click or submit gets fired. So when you perform event binding, so when you perform event binding, then Angular definitely runs the change detector. Now I have a question here, and I asked this question many times in interviews and all. Now, which type of event actually instructs Angular to run the change detector? All events of the world? So let us say that you have a button. On the button, you perform event binding. You put click inside that, and then Angular, and whenever that gets fired, Angular runs change detector. We understand that, right? But let's say here in my code in app component HTML, all right, let's say that I have installed a jQuery, or not jQuery, let's say that I have installed a Dhananjay calendar. All right, let's say that you install a third-party library called Dhananjay calendar in your application. Very important point I'm discussing, everyone. Please focus. All right, so here I'm saying that Dhananjay calendar, and Dhananjay calendar has one event called change date. And on that change date, I'm calling a change date function. Pretty simple code in front of you, line number 6, everyone. Now, my question to you is, I just shown you that Angular runs a change detector when an event, I just shown you that Angular runs a change detector when an event such as click submit gets fired. Now here I'm showing you a code and asking you that, okay, for this change date event, will Angular run change detector? What do you think? Line number 6. And let's say that Dhananjay calendar is some third-party library. Very important question, and you need to understand that. All of us need to understand that. All right. So Angular, runs change detector only. So the condition was that when an event gets fired, Angular runs change detector, right? Now, what type of events? The events which are part of ng zone. So any event which is part of ng zone, when they get fired, then only Angular runs CD. So if I ask you by showing this code that, hey, will Angular run change detector for change date event? Your answer should be that, hey, we got to check, since it is a third party library, we do not know whether that's a jQuery based library or what kind of library. And if this change date event is part of ng zone, then only Angular run change detector for this event. Otherwise, it would not run. So this is very important, which you need to keep in mind. All right, everyone. So step one is should be clear to you that an event such as click and submit gets fired. All right. So an event such as click and submit gets fired. In that case, Angular runs change detector. Other is that whenever you make an XHR call from your application. So XHR is a browser object which Angular internally use to make the API call. So whenever you perform an API call, Angular runs change detector. And the third condition is asynchronous JavaScript function such as setInterval gets executed. So when Angular change detector runs, and please let's go step by step. I see many interesting questions in the chat. We would answer those questions one by one, but let's go here step by step first. That when Angular change detector runs, we do not know. But if one of these conditions get executed, when an event which is part of ng zone gets fired, when you make an XHR call, or when a asynchronous JavaScript function such as setTime or setInterval gets executed, in that case, Angular runs change detector. All right. So this should be clear to you. Now you can see, and there's one question from Gautam that how internally Angular change detector works. And Gautam, we are getting there. So please focus here. And if you have any question, I would love to answer that. So here you see that your whole Angular application is actually collection of components, right? And you can visualize your Angular application as an Angular component tree. Like you have a root component, then you have a child component, then you have another child component, and then there is a child component inside a child component, and so on. So you can visualize Angular component tree, the whole Angular application as an Angular component tree. So if you can visualize an Angular application as Angular component tree, right? And let's say that user clicks a button in the CC211, which is nested child component of child component 2 and then CC21. Now what happens that when user clicks on that button, all right? And please focus here, everyone, okay? So let's say that this is your application. There's a root component, child component 2, CC11, CC12, and so on. Now there's a button in CC211 component, and your user is clicking that button. So as soon as user clicks the button, what Angular does? Everyone, what Angular does, it starts running change detector from the top. It would go in a default scenario, in a default configuration, it would go and run change detector of root component. Then it would run change detector of one of the child components. We are really not sure whether it's Angular component tree traversing follow a breadth first or depth first approach. But it will execute change detector of one of the child component, then another child components, and so on. So even if in the component tree you have 100 of components and you perform that one of those action, which is clicked an event, raised a click event or submit event, or you performed an API operation, or you executed a JavaScript asynchronous function. Even if you perform that in the bottom component, Angular starts running the change detector from the top. So here you clicked, it would run. Always remember that, okay? It will start running from the top. like this. So Angular always runs change detector in a top-down approach from the parent component to the children components. All right, so here it is. It runs like that. Now you may have a question, my friend, that hey, there are hundred of components in my application, and I click that one place, and Angular is running change detector of the whole application. I'm sure performance must be affected. Performance must be not that good because, like, just for one operation, it is executing component tree of every components of the whole application tree. And the answer of that is in the next slide. Performance. Now, Angular component tree is a directed graph, which means there's a unidirectional flow of change detector from root to bottom. It would never happen that you perform some action and Angular started running change detector from left component to right component, or from children component to parent component. No, it will always start from the parent component, and always it would go from top to down. So it is a unidirectional flow of change detector from root to bottom. Angular knows in which direction tree has to be traversed, and there's no circular or bidirectional traversing of the change detector tree. So if you go and revise your data structure from your college days, you know that a directed graph is performance of directed graph is much better than performance of graph which is not directed. So that is one thing that data structure makes sure that your performance is better. Second is that after a single pass, change detection tree gets stable. All right, after a single pass, change detection tree gets stable. Now, unlike AngularJS, in Angular, there is no generic function to update the view. So AngularJS had just one function, and that function was updating the view. Here, it is not the case. Since here, every component has its own change detector, JavaScript virtual machine can optimize it for better performance. So these three are the design guideline of change detector. On that, Angular team has built change detector. And as a developer, what you really need to know is this diagram, that it always goes from, in a default scenario, like in all scenario, it will go from parent to child, from the root to bottom. All right. So now you may have a question that, okay, in this, like, let's say that here I am here and I click the button, and then it is running change detector this, then 3, then 7, then 9. Like it is running change detector for all 9 components. Can I reduce that? Can I write code in such a way that it does not run change detector of all the components, and it only runs where I want to run it, or of course, for one button click, if it is running change detector of 9 component, and for the same button click, if it is running change detector of 5 components, then performance is better, right? So can we reduce that number of check? That is something which we need to understand. We need to know if we can, then how. And I see that there are many questions on the performance and all. So can we reduce that number of checks? When I say number of checks, means the change detector which is running for the component. And if we are able to do that, then we are able to improve performance a bit. So here is your app component, and then you have count component, which I just created, and then I have another child component. And you see that, can I reduce that number of checks such that, like, let's say that if I click the button here in the bottom CD, then only change detector will start running from the top. So it would run off the app component, then it runs off the another child component, and then other 2 CD, and then CD, but it does not run change detectors of the components which are on the other subtree. All right. So how we can do that? How we can reduce number of checks? So to reduce number of checks, Angular has given you 2 change detection strategies: default and on push. All right. Angular has given you 2 change detection strategies: default change detection strategy and on push change detection strategy. Now let's see that. What does it mean? So here, so let's summarize what we have done so far before we go further. We started with the definition. We started with the definition of with the definition of change detector. Then we saw in demo that if we remove change detector of a component, then even data binding does not work. Then we learned a little bit theory of change detector, that it starts from the top and goes in the bottom. Also, we learned that if we do not know when change detector runs, but if one of those three conditions happens, such that event gets fired, API gets called, gets executed, or asynchronous JavaScript function gets executed, Angular makes sure to run change detector then and there. And then we saw that, does Angular run change detector for all type of events? No, it only runs change detector for the events which are part of ng zone. All right. So sometimes that's the reason you might have seen many people remove an event out of ng zone to improve performance and those kind of thing. All right. So let's now, and then we saw that even for one click, Angular is running change detector of whole component tree, how we can reduce that, how we can reduce number of checks. And for that, Angular gives us two type of change detection strategies. They are on push and default. Next, we are going to learn about on push and default change detection strategy. So what I'm going to do here, all right, so what I'm going to do here to reduce the number of checks, here in count component, I'll delete this. Is it font and all is okay, everyone? All right, so pretty simple count component. And in this count component, what I'm going to do, I will just say const template. And in this template, what I'm going to do, I'm going to put one h3. All right, so count in child, counter.count. And then here I am creating one property counter, and this property I'm going to expect value in this property from outside this. So that's why I'm saying I'm putting it as input decorated property. Let's say that any. All right, so here we have just created one input counter, and then we are displaying counter.count. All right, and next what I'm going to do in app component.html, I'm going to use that app count and then set that counter value with a property counter here. All right, and also here I'll put a button. Okay, so here I have put a button, just app count, and then setting with the property binding the value of counter, and then there's a button that would increase the count value, and I'm calling it is, and then it would call a inc count function. So let's go ahead and create that in app component.ts. In app component.ts, what I'm going to do here, I'm going to say that, hey, create an object called counter, and that object has a value 1. All right, and then I need to call that function inc count, which I'll put it here. So pretty simple code here. There is one variable, one object called counter, and it has one property count, and the value is set to 1. Then there's a button. On click of that button, we would call increment count, and here we are incrementing that value. So nothing fancy. All right, and let's see that how it works. So we'll go save, and then it doesn't have title somewhere, so let's get rid of that. And here also, I guess, oh, we are not using that anyway. Count component.html, we need to say template as template. All right, so we are using the inbuilt template, inline template, I mean, and then here compiled successfully, and it looks good. Count in child 1, increase count value. Everything looks good, right? So what is happening when you are clicking on this button, increase count, it is on the parent component. It is changing that value and counting change detector to run. Now, understand that if in the default scenario, if change detector of parent component runs, then change detector of child component will also run. So when you are clicking on this increase count value, actually you are uh, mm, requesting Angular to run change detector for app component. Is it clear, everyone? Because this increase count value button is on the app component. And as you saw that it always go from top to down. So here you click the button and CD runs here, and then CD will run for the child component also, which is in this case the count component, right? So that's the reason when you are changing the value, you have the updated data, because the change detector of child component is also running there. All right. So let's see that here in the count component, what I'm going to do. Let us first see that life cycle hooks, because that is something very important. Here I'll say on init, and then on changes, and then here ng on changes void, right? And let's call it as console.log constructor. Then console.log here will say ng on init. Then here we'll say console.log ng on changes. Let's see first that how lifecycle hooks gets called for the child component, at least for these three. So here F12, if you see, the first constructor gets called and then ng on changes and then ng on init. When you increase the count value, all right, so that is something which you need to keep in mind. Now, what I'm going to do next here is, okay, so in the component, now I would say change detection, and here change detection strategy. If you don't set that value, that is default. And if you want, you can change it to on push. So here I'm changing it to on push. In app.component.ts, what I'm saying console.log this dot counter.count. I'm printing that. Now let's go back here. All right, and press F12. So here I'm incrementing that value. You see that value is being incremented, right? So the value of count is incremented in the app component, but in the screen, if you see, you are not getting the expected output. That template that is not getting reflected. It is not in the sync with the data, which we are rendering, which we are binding on the count component template. And why? We just did one change. Here we are saying that, hey, for the count component, the change detection strategy is set to on push. If I set it to default and run it again, here you see that everything is working fine. As soon as here data is getting updated, here you are getting updated as well. But if I change it to on push and saving it again, you see that value is getting updated, but it is not getting updated in the count component, because of course change detector is not running for the chat, or change detector is not running for the chat for the count component. Now, how you think I can fix it? Anyone? How should I fix it? How I can make sure that it is fixed? One way of fixing it is, if you go back again to this slide where we started, In this slide, we started that Angular runs change detector when an event such as click submit gets fired, when you make an XHR call to work with the API, and when asynchronous JavaScript functions such as set timeout or set interval gets executed. So if on the count component, I see that data is getting updated, it is set to on push, but change detector is not running. If on the count component, I'll go here and just say, hello, Sunny, can you hear me? Sunny, can you hear me? Am I audible? Can one of you please unmute and let me know? Uh, I guess there was some, I guess there was some issue, but that's fine. We are back.
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah. Okay, I'm back, everyone. Can you hear me? Can everyone hear me? Just let me know using the chat window. You are able to see the screen as well? You able to see the screen that Google? All right, so you are able to see this increase count value and refresh page on your screen. Yeah, it started raining very heavily in Gurgaon, and probably that is the reason that internet got disconnected. We are back again. We are back. We are back again. So, all right. So here you see that what I have done again to, I'm sorry for that. Again to summarize that we created a component, and that component is as you see is set to on push, and then when we are incrementing the value here in the increase count value, that value is not getting updated because of course change detector is not running for some reasons, right? So here what we are doing, what I have done, I have put one more button called refresh, because if you recall that Angular, if I need to make sure that Angular runs change detector, I can do one of those things. I can raise an event, which is part of ng zone. I can make an API call, or I can execute a JavaScript asynchronous function. So here I have created a button and a dummy button, and when I click here, you see that it is causing change detector to run. So when I click on this refresh, it is running change detector of app component, and then it is running change detector of count component. And that's the reason you are getting the updated value. Then again, I'm incrementing here the value, so that the value is being changed. Change detector of app component is running, but when it is coming to count component, which is the child component in this case, it is set to on push, and on push has a different characteristics. So change detector is not running, and since change detector is not running, you are not having the updated data here. So one workaround is I have put refresh button here. When I click on the refresh button, it is actually triggering change detector, and then I'm getting the updated value. Okay, so this is the one way of doing that. So what is exactly on push? We need to understand. So the on push is another change detection strategy, and here you go. So default, you know that default is default, and if you can see my screen, and then the on push. So if your component is set to default change detection strategy, then data changes to the so whenever data changes to the input decorated property, change detector runs, right? In the default, if in the default change detection strategy, data changes, change detector runs. However, in on push, change detector only runs when a new reference is passed to the input decorated properties. So if you pass new object, new reference, then only in on push, Angular runs change detector for that component and its child components. Otherwise, it does not run. So what is happening, if you look at here, we are not passing the new reference. We are here updating the same object, the value of the same object. So a new object is not being passed to the count component, and and count component is set to on push. That's the reason Angular is not running the change detector. One workaround, we saw that we manually hit a click event. We could manually run change detector and all those kind of thing. But other thing could be, what if I pass a new object? If I pass a new reference to the counter, then change detector runs. So let's try to do that. Okay, so here let's go ahead and start. Let's pass a new, let us pass a new object. So what I'm going to do in the INC count here, let's comment that, and here we'll say this dot counter is equal to, I'm making another new object, and then saying count is this dot counter dot count plus 1. So here we are constructing new object, means we are passing new reference now. And even though, so now our Angular change detect, our count component is set to on push, and we are passing new object. So Angular should able to run the change detector. So here, let's go and run this increment count value, and you are getting here that the count value, the change detector is running. So the step 1 to reduce number of check is to make sure that you set your child component to on push. If you set it to on push, then to trigger change detector, either you have to perform those three operations, such that event and API call and asynchronous JavaScript function execution, or you need to pass new object to this particular component, and then change detector will run. So if you have 100 of properties here, input decorated property, if any of them will get a new reference, Angular will run the change detector for this component. Keep that in mind. All right, so now it is clear that you should keep it on push and pass new object. But it may happen, my friend, that you don't have control to pass new object. What if you are not able to create new object? The data is coming from somewhere else and they are not passing new object. Now, how we would fix that problem? Right? Let's say that you are writing count component and you have to put it on push. You have an input decorated counter property. You have written that, but you do not have control on app component.ts. So here we created a new object, but what if they are saying that they would not create a new object, for whatever reason that component cannot create new object and pass it to you? Then how would you make sure that change detector is running for this component? One was what we did. So one was that what we did, we here put that button, and using that button, we are able to run change detector. But the challenge with that approach is that that, see here, so the challenge with that approach, challenge with that approach is that your user, so here you see that your data is incrementing, and right now data is not incremented. User can keep clicking this refresh button, and as many times user is clicking on that refresh button, your change detector is running, and you do not want that. So how we can solve this problem? We can solve this problem if we see this like that. So we need to run change detector of this. So we need to run change detector here. And when we need to run a change detector here, when data changes here in the parent component. So if by any way I'm able to get notification or identify when data changed in the parent component, and then run change detector manually, then I can improve performance of my application very drastically. Now in Angular, you use this something called RxJS, observable. Now again, very popular question, what is observable and what is subject? So what is observable? Let me give you a little bit of understanding there, right? So here, and I'm just going to write a little bit of pseudocode. So let's say that if you have an object called foo, and that object has a property called age 9. Now there is one person here called subscriber 1. They are using this foo.age in line number 9. Now the value of foo.age is updated at here in line number 12. Now value of age is updated in line number 12 for whatever reason, but still if you go to the subscriber 1, the value is 9 here, even if it is updated to 10. Now if you use this subscriber again here, subscriber 1, in line number 15, even though the value is 10, subscriber 1 knows value of foo.age as 9. And if subscriber 1 has to update itself with the updated value of age, subscriber 1 has to again do this foo.age functionality calling and all. So usually 95% time or more than that, when you write an application, you write like this. You have an object, but that object is not capable enough to notify its users, to notify subscriber that, hey, there's something changed in me. Our object never says that. Here it is the responsibility of subscriber or the user to make sure to find out that, hey, is something changed? Does something change inside the object? So when you write this application like this is called pull approach. You are pulling the information always to get the updated information. And this is how usually we write the application. But assume that if this foo is a special foo, it is a special kind of foo. Now this foo object is a special kind of object. Now it has an ability to notify everyone who are using it whenever the value of age changes in it. So that kind of object which has characteristics or ability to notify its consumers, subscribers, whenever something changes in them, are called either promises or observable. All right. So promises is a special type of object which can push information. So when you write, so in this case, what would happen that if it is a special kind of object, then you just have to do it once, and whenever the age changes, it will automatically notify you, and then you can do whatever you want to do on top of that. So now what is promise? Promise is that a special type of object, and now an observable is also that special type of object. So what is difference between promises and observable? Promise can only notify you the final change. Promise can only return one value in the future. Promise can only push one value, the final value, and of course the error things. However, observable can keep pushing the change. So let's say that if this foo is a promise and the value of age is changed 10 times, then a promise can only tell you 19. However, an observable can tell you 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 19. So that is what observable is. An observable promise is now part of JavaScript. Observable is not. So to work with observable, you need to use a third-party library called RxJS. So here we are going to use observable. When I talk to students and when I ask them what is difference between promises and observable, I tell you what kind of definition they give. This is the difference. You just need to know this if you understand it, what I'm saying here. All right. So again, it is a pseudo code. Don't go in the syntax and all that. Sometimes we'll do maybe next webinar do on RxJS. Please come and we'll go in detail of that. But I just wanted to bring that to your attention. Now, the other popular question is what is difference between observable and subjects? Now, there are 4 types of subjects in RxJS and in Angular: subject, behavior, replay, and async. The only difference between observable and subjects are that observable can have only one subscriber. So let's say that if it is an observable, all right, and let's say that it has a function called age. All right. So if it is an observable, then what happens that RxJS creates different age function for subscriber 1, different age function for subscriber 2, and it would create different age function for subscriber 3. So observable is unicasted. However, if it is a subject, any type of subject, the same age function will be used and shared across subscriber 1, subscriber 2, subscriber 3, and so on. And that's the reason subjects are called multicasted. All right. So I hope you understand a little bit of thing. So here we are going to use observable because observable is a kind of object or subject. We are going to use subject, which can notify whenever something changes in that. So here, let's go back to our application again. Okay, so here what I'm going to do, what we do not want to pass new object, but we want to make sure that the change detector runs here. We don't want to use this phrase also because our user can keep clicking, and keep clicking. All right, so let's see that what we can do next to improve performance. So what I'm going to do, my friend here, in the app component, all right, so in the app component here, I'm saying count equal to 1, and then I'm clicking a counter which is of type any. All right, and then in ng on init, I'm saying this dot counter is equal to new behavior subject. Now, what is the difference between subject and behavior subject? Behavior subject always has a default value, and when you start reading it, you read from the last emitted value. Let us do RxJS in next webinar. Promise all of you will come in that. All right, so please come to that webinar. We'll do RxJS in detail. So here I'm saying count 0. All right, so here I have created a behavior subject. And in the function increment count, what I'll do, it always sends you the next value, the next function. So here I can say this dot counter dot next count plus this dot. All right, so I just created a behavior subject here. All right, so good. Now let's see that how we can use it. So here, to use it in the component, you subscribe to an observable. So we'll call it input counter as observable any. All right, and in the ng on changes, we would say this dot counter dot subscribe, and this subscribe again takes 3 functions. Function 1 is your data. Second is your, what is the second one? Error. And the third one is complete. So I'm saying console.log completed. If there's an error, we would say console.log and error. And here, let's just print that. So here what I'm saying, I have one count as any, and let's say that I'll say this dot count equal to data dot count, and let's print that value console.log this dot count. All right, so here I subscribe to that, and I guess for complete, I don't need to pass here complete, right? It is a parameterless function, if I'm not wrong, right, everyone? Line number 35. One thing I can do here is I can say counter dollar, and then I can make it subscriber, and then here I can say this dot counter dollar is equal to this dot counter dot subscribe. Oh, sorry, not subscriber, it should be subscription. All right, so we'll say that counter dollar as type subscription. All right, and then here on ng on destroy, we can then say this dot counter dollar dot unsubscribe. All right. So this is the code we have written, and let's see that what happens here. So save, and then we can display that data dot count there in the HTML. So count in child, here count in child equal to, we just need count, not data dot count. All right, so it is on push. We are subscribing, passing observer from there, and see that how it looks. So compile successfully, we are here, ran it. Okay, so let's increment the count value. You see that in the count component, now we are getting the notification that, hey, value has been changed. The value has been changed. And of course, change detector is not running because we are not passing a new object in it. But we are getting notification due to the help of observable that the value is changed. If you want to subscribe to that. So here we know that in line number 31, that if line number 30 and 31 is getting executed, it means we know that the value has been changed. The value of count has been changed. It means we need to manually trigger the change detector here. And how you can trigger change detector manually? For that, in line number 19, inject that change detector ref. And here you can say this dot cd dot. Then you have options of detect changes and mark for check. What you should use, detect changes or mark for check? Very important. You should use mark for check. And this is another important question, that what is difference between detect changes and mark for check? Now, what is mark for check? When you call mark for check, Angular does not run change detector then and there. It just makes this component dirty. It just mark this component dirty. And when next time change detector runs, Angular makes sure to run change detector for this component. That is called mark for check. So when you do mark for check, Angular marks this component dirty and all the parent component of this component dirty up to the root component. And next time when change detector runs, all those would get, all the change detector for all those mark component would get called. So this is mark for check. The other option is detect change. Now detect changes is, so mark for check goes from upward and it does not run change detector then and there. It just mark it as such that change detector runs in the next change CD cycle. When you do detect changes, Angular runs change detector then and there. Angular run change detector then and there, and mark for check goes from child component to parent component. Detect changes goes from this component to the child component. So if you do detect changes, it does not go to the parent components. It runs change detector immediately for this component and all its child components. That's what detect changes. When in doubt, use mark for check. Okay, so here I'm manually triggering this mark for check, and now let's go and run this. And here we are getting the data. So here we are manually able to configure it and able to work on that. So this is how you you can reduce number of checks, and this is how actually your data should be, your components should be. The other option is, everyone, is, let us say that this count component, okay, I'll come to that later, but before that, if so far so good, let's go ahead and do one thing. I have this component, count component, and right now this count component is almost, right now this count component is almost like 43 lines. And let's say that if user has done it default, then for no reason we are using that, right? We really don't need to use this mark for check if it is on default. And if it is on push, then we have to change to run that, right? So as a developer, we need to make sure to check whether it is on push or not. If it is on push, then make sure that we are manually calling the change detector, and we are manually calling the change detector and all, right? So here we are doing as a developer. So what we are doing, we are detecting when data is changing, then manually calling the change detector, and then also we are unsubscribing to that. So these 3-4 tasks we are doing as a developer. So imagine that if you have 100 of input decorated properties observable type, you need to write this code for one property. This is like kind of 30, kind of like 10 lines of code. For 100 it will be 1,000 lines of code. And here manually you are running the change detector, here you are manually unsubscribing, and you are doing those tasks. Sometimes you have to do that. And when, let's say that you want to run a business logic, that if this dot count is greater than 6, then send email, something like that, right? If you need to run a business logic on the data which is coming, of course you need to go with the approach which is here, the subscribe approach. But the recommended approach from Angular team is, which helps you not to manually call a change detector, not to unsubscribe, and Angular takes care of that for you, is to use async pipe. So what I'm going to do to show you that how I can use async pipe here. So I have taken the whole component and I commented that, and then again I'm typing this same component here. And what I'm going to do here, my friend, that I will get rid of everything from here. So ng on changes, ng on destroy, I really don't need them here. So I deleted that. I deleted the whole code from ng on changes. All right. And then I deleted this counter subscription. I really don't need that. I don't need this change detector ref. I deleted that as well. All right. And what I'm going to do is input counter observable any, that is there. And then I'm just even not taking that. So see, my component is pretty clean. And only thing what I will do in here. So here I will say in the template. So I'm just modifying the template here. And in the template, I'm saying that, hey, div, show this div when there is a value of counter, and this counter is of type observable. So read it using the async pipe, which is I'm putting it here async, and then reading the data and just displaying that there. So this async pipe is actually doing all tasks for me, what I was doing here manually. What async pipe does, it detects the data changes, it runs change detector manually for you, and then it unsubscribes when the job is done. So if you have used async here, and If it is on default, Angular will not run change detector and nothing would get impacted. Tomorrow you are coming here and changing that to, let's say, on post, it will run change detector for you. So this is what async pipe is. Let's see that whether we are able to get data there or not. So here you are getting that data, right? So that's always, it is recommended to use async pipe. You see the number of code is now pretty simple, pretty clean here when you are using async pipe. So I hope now you know what is async pipe, what is subscribe method, when to use them. And let me just show you some difference between them. So here in change detection strategies, data changes with the input decorated properties, new references passed to the input decorated properties, then on push should be called. So this would help you to reduce number of checks. Now I'm coming to, before I go to detached, right? I'm coming to some real-time scenario, which some of you are asking. Let me try to explain as best of my capability. So here, see, the way you should write your application is ideally some of the thing which you need to keep in mind to write a better Angular application, other than app component, okay, other than the root component, put every component on push. All right, use async pipe, or manually detect, change, and run change detector. This is the approach you need to follow. Now I'm going to show you here. Yesterday I shared that also. Okay, so now what you see on your screen is called something in Angular world, is something called in Angular world you should so let me first see the questions. Arpit, you got your answer, right? We use the async pipe. Not mark check mask component trees as dirty, and next time cd runs check detect change run change editor there and there. Yes, so big boy, I don't know what is your name. So big boy, you are right, as we discussed that mark for check just runs, just mark the component and all its parent component as dirty, and next time when change detector runs, it execute a change detector for that. However, detect changes runs change detector then and there for that component and all its child components. So you are right there. Let me see if any other questions. Should be subscribe, and change input changes, it will subscribe again. Yeah, I guess if you are using, we are using observable, we can go to ng on init, because anyway it would get called. So you are right there. Okay. Can we use ng do check to compare reference values and detect changes manually? That would be very complex. I would not, Swarup, I would not recommend that, because first ng do check is very unreliable lifecycle hooks, right? In development, it would run twice for one data change. In production, it would run once. So I guess you can avoid that just by using async or manually detecting change detector, calling change detector, right? Big boy saying, please elaborate. What you want me to elaborate? Should we use, is that question? Should we use ng zone dot run outside Angular while using set timeout for increasing performance? Yeah, many people do that, and I'll come to this question at the last of this. Okay, remind me again, please. I'll come to this after smart component and dumb component. Is it okay with you, big boy? What is your name? All right, so now what you see on your screen is about a smart component and dumb component, right? Now in Angular world, these terms are very very, like, I have been using this term, and this is the way you should architect your application. Okay, so I see that every component people make in Angular from every component they make an API call and all that. You should not do that. The approach should be that if I have to create a application, what I would do that always, let's say that you are creating an application where you need to display the same data in two ways. What you do, create a parent component and call that parent component as a smart component. So all the outside integration would be done on that smart component. You make that mm, you'll make that you'll make that component you'll make all the API call and all those things in that smart component. So your service call and everything would be on the smart component. So if I go here and let's say that in app component here, you may think that this data is coming from API. Right. So this component job is to only talk to the outside APIs and all that, and it does not have a lot of HTML. It only have in the template those child components which are known as dump component. What is advantage of this is that very easily you can write unit test for this component. It doesn't have a lot of UI. You can write unit test of all the functionalities. So here you are making that API call, and you are passing data from a smart component to dump components using the input and output decorators. So the dump component is never going to call API directly. It is getting data only through the parent component. And from parent to child, if you need to pass data, you should use input decorated property. If on the dump component user is performing an action, that action should be handled in the smart component. So that event should get emitted to the smart component using the output decorator. Now your dump component should always be on push. Your dump component the change detection strategy of your dump component should always be on the on push, and it should use async pipe, and it always talks to other components through the smart component. So this is what you need to keep in mind and try to architecture your application in such a way, and that would help you to write better application, improve performance. So to improve performance, you saw a step one: put on push, use on push change detection strategy. And use async pipe, use observable, use async pipe to work with observable. Now, someone asked that what is the real-time example? Here we are understanding that how we can see when you learn about car, what is the real-time example of engine is not a valid question. Real-time example is of car. Is that answer is true for what is the real-time example of engine? Maximum people can tell you that engine is the one which runs the car. So in the same way, change detection is not the feature of Angular. Whoever asked that question, that what is the real-time example? Change detection is the engine of Angular. So whatever is the real-time example of Angular is the real-time example of change detection, change detector. I hope I'm clear here what I'm saying, right? So this is the engine we are here learning that how we can fine tune that engine a little bit, how we can make sure that our performance of the whole Angular application is better. And we saw that, hey, try to put it on push. So now what is on push? So we started with learning what is change detection. First, you need to understand the definition. Then we saw that, hey, in this scenario, change detector runs, event gets fired, or you make an API call, or you JavaScript asynchronous functions get executed. Then we saw that, hey, even the whole Angular application is like a component tree. If anywhere we click a button, Angular is running change detector of whole application. And that may be causing problem, that may be causing some performance. So then we are learning that how we can reduce that number of checks. So Angular has given us two options of change detection strategies. One is default, by default, that is by default, and then on push. On push, again, if one of those three things happen, then in on push also Angular will run the change detector. Or if you pass a new object to input decorated property, then in on push strategy, change detector will run. So then we moved further and we saw that, okay, what if we are not able to pass new object, then what should we do? Then we are left with the option to manually call the change detector. Then we got caught in the problem that how we would know that when manually we can call a change detector. So for that we then learned about observable and all, which would a special type which can notify whenever the data changes in them. So we use subject. Then we saw that we can subscribe to the subject, and whenever in the subscribe method gets executed, means data changed, and we are calling Angular change detector manually by mark for check or detect changes. Then we learned difference between these two. Then we saw that, okay, this is good, but there is something called async pipe. And now what is async pipe? Async pipe is actually whatever manually you are doing with our subscribe method, async pipe does for you. Means subscribing to an observable, running change detector manually whenever data changes, and unsubscribing when the observable is completed. So far we have covered that. Then we learned about a smart component and dumb component, that when you architecture your application, you should architecture in such a way that always your parent component is making a call to API and all that, and then you're passing that through input output decorated properties and all. So if we follow these things, we can reduce number of checks and substantially improve number of performance of application. The other approach is, which I'm going to show you next, and I'm not sure whether you should do that or not. And to do that, you really need to understand Angular very understand change detection very thoroughly. So the other approach is called, and I call them detached. You are able to see my screen? Yeah. So I call them detached patterns. So what you do, as in the beginning, some of you have asked, that some of you have asked that can we just deattach the change detector? You can do that for a component subtree, and then you can manually reattach it whenever required on certain conditions, and then run the change detector manually. But keep in mind, if you have deattached a change detector for a component, it means you have deattached the whole subtree. So if I'm saying that if I have deattached this change detector for count component, then actually now Angular will not run change detector itself for count component and all its child components. So I have deattached the whole whole subtree. All right, so let's see that how we can work with the detached pattern. And here, and in the beginning you saw that. So what we can do in the counter here. All right, so how I can do that in the count component, I'm going to comment it again, so that when I share this code with you, you have that all the options. So here I'm saying in the constructor, let's go here and say private change detector ref. I think Dr. Atul is not very happy with me. Sorry, Dr. Atul, couldn't meet your expectation. Is a cd.detach. Okay, so here we have deattached that. Now you may have a button or something. Let's say that here you can put a button, and then in that button, let's say that here you're saying that reference. Now to refresh that, since it is deattached, and let's say that here I'm saying that refresh function, and here your change detector is deattached, and now you know that hey, if data changes on that button, you can say this dot cd dot reattach. So when you do reattach, it doesn't mean it to run change detector. It only means that again, change detector is attached back, and then whatever we have learned so far, those knowledge would be applied here. Now, this is something very important. Okay, everyone, very few people knows that. You can follow that. What if my change detector is detached, but I want to run change detector once for that component and all its child components? So for example, let's say that here, the whole count component is detached from the component tree, and I want to run change detector just once without reattaching it. Because if I reattach it, then again it has become the part of component tree. And then again, everything, whatever you have learned would be applied here. But what if I don't want to reattach it and I just want to run change detector for count component and all its children, and count component change detector is detached, right? So here what you can do, and this is something where your that comes to the action, detect changes. Detect changes has the capability to run change detector even even the change detector is detached. You know why? Because as we talked, and if you remember that, as we talked, that detect changes runs change detector from top to bottom. It does not go to the parent. Mark for check go to the parent. Detect change does not go for the parent. So when you do detect changes, even on the detached component, on the count component where change detector is detached, it will run change detector for count component and all its children. So detect changes in those scenarios is very powerful. All right. So that is something which I wanted to bring to your attention, right? So when you do detect changes, it will run for that. So, and how marker check works? So here marker check, what it does, it just mark them, right? It goes to the parent. It does not run change detector then and there. In the next CD cycle, Angular will run change detector for root, child component 1, CC1, 2, and so on. So mark for check, mark parent component up to the root component as dirty to be checked. So these are the five methods you have on change detector ref. Detect changes you know now, run change detection for the component and its children. It runs CD once also for the component which is detached from the component tree. I'll share this image on the Twitter and LinkedIn, and you may keep that for the reference. It may help you in interviews and all. So it runs CD once also for the component which is detached from the component tree. That is detect changes. Then mark for check, it marks component with its all parent up to root as dirty. In next cycle, Angular runs CD for marked components. All right. Then reattach the component in the chain detection tree. If parent's component CD is deattached, it won't help. So make sure to run mark for check with reattach, right? So as I told you, the reattaching does not mean that change detector will run. It is just reattaching. Deattach, you know that. Now there is one thing which we have not covered, which is check no changes. Change the component, check the component and its children and throws error if change detected. So let us say you need to find out whether something is changed for this, whether change detector ran for this component or not, and you want to throw an error on top of that. Then in that case, you can call check no changes. Consider it as your assignment. Go and do a little bit research on that. All right. So again, after learning everything, if you come back here, actually what is change detection? Here is your data model, right? And you change that in the template it is getting, and that is actually happening due to the change detector. The magician is the change detector here. So this is what all I have for today. I hope everyone, I hope it was useful. After a long time I did it, but I'm planning to do it each other Saturday, like each, how to say that, like after a gap of is one Saturday. So today, then after in the next Saturday to next Saturday again we'll do. We are planning to do NG India also online. We thought that everything would be fine and we'll do that offline, but it does not look like that in 2021 it would be there. So we'll do NG India online, and I'll announce if any one of you want to speak in one of the webinars or in NG India, please reach out to me or Sunny, and we would definitely try to give you the platform the way we did and gave in the past to other speakers. So I hope it is useful. Also, I am starting my new paid batch next Saturday or something, which I'll announce on my LinkedIn and send you email. If anyone is interested, you can ask them to join that. That is a paid. It does not mean if someone does not have money they should not learn. Just tell me you cannot pay for that, I'd make sure that you learn Angular. Our whole purpose is that we learn together and grow. And one good news is that besides Angular, I'm bringing Vue.js also to Geek 97 community, and I hope that would be good learning too. So thank you so much, everyone. Be safe, be kind, and I'm sure there's a lot to learn in change detection. In 90 minutes, whatever we could cover, I covered. And thank you so much. Thank you for coming. Thank you. In next 2 minutes, I'll discontinue the live stream. Thank you. So Arpit, I mean, that is thing, right? Like if you want to run change detector only for a component and all its children, then deattach that component, change detector for that component, and do the detect changes. Otherwise, there is no other way. Yes, Dheeraj, we'll do RxJS session soon. Next is RxJS. Rajat, I'll write maybe a blog post about that. I have not explored it, what other features have come. So I'll research and write a blog post. Yeah, Naveed, many people do that, but I'm not sure how much performance that increase. Sujit, that is a very, I don't expect that wrong question from you. You are much more talented than that. Change detector is married to component, right? So it is only with the component, not with anywhere else. Siddharth is asking which one is better to pass data to child component, sub or using input variables. What is sub, Siddharth? Yeah, we can do Node.js, Lalit. Yeah, Dhanesh, uh, I have not explored what is in Angular 12 yet. I'll explore in a day or two and then write a blog post and send in an email to all of you. Uh, do you have a specific? I put it on LinkedIn and Twitter. We are building Geek 97 website, but my blog is debugmode.net. So how they are related? Subject is a type, right? Some like right now in input decorated property, we pass the subject behavior there. So if it is a dumb component, better always pass that through the input decorated. Oh, I understand what you are saying. Oh, okay. You are saying that like you are talking about how to communicate between two unrelated components. In that case, if a component is not a child component, then in that case you have to use subjects. Otherwise, if it is a child component, use input decorated properties. we can pass the reference to the service from component, and then call detect change from service. Yeah. Okay, guys, I hope it was good. Thank you so much.